The spotlight hit Frank Sinatra as he walked onto the stage at the Desert Inn in Las Vegas, but something was wrong. At 79 years old, Frank's stride wasn't as confident as it once was. His trademark fedora sat slightly askew, and when he reached for the microphone, his hand trembled. Tony Oppedisano watched from the wings, his heart pounding with worry. As Frank's closest friend and road manager for the past decade, Tony had seen Frank struggle with the effects of age, the forgotten lyrics, the shortened breath, the moments of confusion. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt dangerous. Frank opened his mouth to sing the opening notes of Fly Me to the Moon, and nothing came out. The orchestra waited. The audience of 2,200 people fell silent. Frank tried again, and this time only a whisper emerged from the voice that had once commanded stages around the world. What Tony did next would save Frank Sinatra's dignity and mark the end of the most legendary career in entertainment history. If you love discovering the untold stories behind music history's most incredible moments, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. March 6th, 1995. Desert Inn Hotel and Casino, Las Vegas. 4 p.m. soundcheck. Tony Oppedisano stood in the empty showroom, watching Frank rehearse for what would unknowingly become one of his final performances. Even during soundcheck, Tony could hear the strain in Frank's voice. The instrument that had defined American popular music for 5 decades was failing. "How's it sound out there, Tony?" Frank called from the stage. Tony forced a smile. "Sounds great, boss. Like always." But it didn't sound great. Frank's voice, once clear and powerful enough to fill any room without amplification, now required careful microphone adjustments and sound engineering to mask its frailty. Frank was scheduled to perform as part of his Diamond Jubilee World Tour, a farewell tour celebrating his 80th birthday year. But Tony knew the real reason Frank was still performing. He didn't know how to be anyone other than Frank Sinatra, the entertainer. "Frank, maybe we should consider shortening the set tonight," Tony suggested gently. "Start with some of your easier songs." Frank's blue eyes flashed with the old fire. "Tony, I've been doing this for 60 years. I don't need easier songs." Tony had heard that defiant tone before. It was the same tone Frank had used when doctors told him to slow down after his heart attack, when critics said his voice was past its prime, when friends suggested he should retire gracefully. Frank Sinatra had never done anything gracefully except sing. March the 6th, 1995, 8:45 p.m. The performance begins. The Desert Inn's showroom was packed with fans, celebrities, and longtime supporters who'd traveled from around the world to see Frank perform. Many suspected this might be their last chance to see the chairman of the board in person. Frank made his entrance to thunderous applause, and for a moment, he looked like his old self, confident, charismatic, in complete command of the room. He settled at the piano for his traditional opening chat with the audience. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Las Vegas, where the drinks are cold, the dice are hot, and the entertainment." Frank paused, searching for the familiar phrase that had deserted him. Tony held his breath from the wings. These moments of confusion were becoming more frequent, more noticeable. "Where the entertainment never stops," Frank finished, covering the hesitation with a trademark smile. The audience applauded, unaware of the brief struggle they'd witnessed. Frank moved to center stage and signaled the orchestra. The opening notes of Fly Me to the Moon began, and Frank opened his mouth to sing. Nothing. Frank cleared his throat and tried again. This time, only a weak whisper emerged. The voice that had serenaded presidents, movie stars, and millions of fans around the world was gone. The orchestra stopped. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Frank stood alone under the spotlight, facing the reality he'd been fighting for months. His voice had finally betrayed him. Tony Oppedisano made a decision that would define their friendship forever. March 6th, 1995. 8:52 p.m. The rescue. Tony walked onto the stage with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there. To the audience, he looked like another member of Frank's organization delivering a message. Only Frank knew what was really happening. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tony said, taking the microphone with easy authority, "Mr. Sinatra is experiencing a slight technical difficulty with his sound equipment. While our engineers fix the problem, Frank would like to share some stories about his career and the songs you'll be hearing tonight." It was a masterful cover story. Tony had bought Frank time and dignity while giving him a way to continue the show without singing. Frank looked at Tony with gratitude and relief. In that moment, Tony wasn't just his road manager. He was the friend who'd saved him from public humiliation. "Thank you, Tony," Frank said quietly, then turned back to the audience. "Well, since I have a captive audience, let me tell you about the first time I recorded Fly Me to the Moon." For the next 45 minutes, Frank entertained the audience with stories, jokes, and memories from his legendary career. Without singing a note, he held 200 people spellbound with just his personality and presence. Tony orchestrated the entire evening from the wings, signaling the orchestra to play instrumental versions of Frank's greatest hits, while Frank provided commentary and shared anecdotes about each song. "This next song," Frank said as the orchestra began, "My Way," was written by Paul Anka. "I wasn't sure about it at first, but Paul convinced me to record it. Good thing, because it became my signature song. Though between you and me, I've done it my way so many times, I'm starting to forget what their way was." The audience laughed and applauded. They were witnessing something unique. Frank Sinatra, unplugged, unguarded, sharing the stories behind the music they'd loved for decades. March 6th, 1995. 9:45 p.m. The ending. As the evening wound down, Frank faced a moment every performer dreads, saying goodbye without knowing if you'll ever return. "Ladies and gentlemen," Frank said, his voice stronger now that he wasn't trying to sing, "I want to thank you for being part of my life for all these years. You've given me everything a performer could ask for. Your attention, your applause, your love." Frank paused, looking out at faces that represented 60 years of performing. "I may not sound like I used to, but I feel the music just as deeply as I ever did. And as long as you remember these songs, as long as you keep them alive, then a part of me will always be with you." The audience gave Frank a standing ovation that lasted 8 minutes. People were crying, not just for the performance they'd missed, but for the end of an era they'd just witnessed. Tony walked onto the stage and embraced Frank as the applause continued. In that embrace, Frank whispered, "Thank you for saving my dignity." "That's what friends do," Tony replied. March the 7th, 1995. The aftermath. The next morning, Tony found Frank in his suite, staring out at the Las Vegas skyline. Frank was still in his robe, looking older than his 79 years. "I couldn't sing, Tony. For the first time in my life, the voice just wasn't there." Tony sat down beside his friend. "Frank, you entertained a room full of people for 45 minutes without singing a note. That's not failure, that's magic. But what happens next? If I can't sing, what am I?" Tony understood that this was about more than vocal cords. Frank's identity had been built around his voice for 7 decades. Without it, he felt lost. "You're Frank Sinatra," Tony said simply. "That doesn't change because your voice changes. You're still the man who revolutionized popular music, who stood up for civil rights, who entertained troops during 3 wars. Your voice was just one part of who you are." Frank nodded slowly, but Tony could see the doubt in his eyes. "Frank, I've been with you for 10 years. I've seen you on good nights and bad nights. Last night wasn't a bad night. It was different. The audience loved it. They got to see the real you, not just the performer." Over the following weeks, Tony helped Frank make one of the most difficult decisions of his life, retiring from live performance. There would be a few more special occasions, a charity benefit here and there, but Frank's days of regular touring were over. 1995, 1998. The final years. Tony became more than Frank's road manager during Frank's final years. He became his protector, confidant, and constant companion. As Frank's health declined, Tony shielded him from public scrutiny while helping him maintain connections with family and close friends. Tony understands something important, Frank told his daughter Tina. He knows that growing old doesn't mean becoming invisible. He helps me stay connected to the world without exposing my weaknesses to people who might exploit them. Tony organized small gatherings at Frank's Beverly Hills home, where Frank could socialize without the pressure of public performance. These intimate evenings became some of Frank's happiest moments during his final years. When Frank's memory began failing, Tony became his memory keeper, gently reminding him of names, dates, and stories when confusion set in. Tony never made me feel stupid or broken, Frank later told friends. He just filled in the gaps and helped me feel like myself. May 14th, 1998. The final goodbye. When Frank Sinatra died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, Tony was one of the last people to see him alive. Frank had been in declining health for months, but his mind was clear during their final conversation. "Tony," Frank said weakly, "that night in Vegas when my voice gave out, that could have been a disaster. You saved me." "Frank, you saved yourself. I just helped." Frank smiled. "We made a good team, didn't we?" "The best," Tony replied, holding his friend's hand. Frank squeezed Tony's hand with surprising strength. "Take care of the music, Tony. Make sure people remember why it mattered." Those were among Frank's last coherent words. At Frank's funeral, Tony delivered part of the eulogy. Frank Sinatra gave everything to his audience for 70 years. But in his final years, when the voice that had defined him began to fail, he taught me something important. Greatness isn't just about talent. It's about grace, dignity, and the courage to be vulnerable in front of the people you love. Tony paused, his voice breaking slightly. The night Frank's voice failed on stage, I watched him transform a potential tragedy into a moment of intimate connection with his audience. He couldn't sing, so he shared his heart instead. That's the Frank Sinatra I'll remember. Not just the performer, but the man who found new ways to touch people's lives, even when his greatest gift was taken away. Today, Tony Oppedisano continues to preserve Frank Sinatra's legacy, sharing stories and insights from their decade-long friendship. He's written books about Frank's final years and serves as a consultant for documentaries about the singer's life and career. "People ask me what Frank was really like," Tony often says. The answer is, he was exactly who you think he was. Passionate, complicated, generous, sometimes difficult, but always authentic. The night his voice failed taught me that true artistry isn't just about technical ability. It's about the courage to connect with people even when you can't do what you've always done best. The Desert Inn performance of March 6, 1995, was never officially recorded, but everyone who was there remembers it as one of the most moving evenings in Las Vegas entertainment history. It was the night Frank Sinatra proved that his greatest instrument wasn't his voice, it was his heart. And it was the night Tony Oppedisano proved that true friendship means being ready to step forward when someone you care about needs help, even if that help means sharing their most vulnerable moment in front of 1,200 people. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to know that growing older doesn't mean becoming less valuable, and that the greatest gift we can give aging loved ones is our presence, support, and unwavering dignity. Have you ever had to help someone face a difficult transition? Let us know in the comments how you've supported friends or family members through challenging changes in their lives.